Well, good morning everyone and welcome to this meeting of Mid-Suffolk District Council Cabinet. I'm Councillor Andy Mellon, leader of Mid-Suffolk District Council, and I will be chairing this meeting. Firstly, can I just remind you of some domestic arrangements? Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Make sure that you do not interrupt other speakers, and if you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure that your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. And also just to remind Cabinet members, we'll be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app. Also like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed except where there are confidential or exempt items, which we do have on the agenda today. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. Finally, the Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. But if you are intending to do so, please can you inform the committee clerk. Having gone through all that, can I move to the agenda, please? Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Weller, Councillor Warboys and Councillor Lay.
Thank you very much. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary, other registrable or non-registrable interests by members. Are there any to declare? None? Thank you. Item 3. This is paper MCA/24/54 to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of March 2025. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of those minutes? If not, can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Stringer, and a seconder, please. Councillor Pearson, thank you very much. The Governance Officer will now conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That's 5 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Item 4, to receive notifications of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Item 5, questions by councillors. The following question has been received by Councillor Miles Rowe, from Councillor Miles Rowe. As they are unable to attend the meeting, I will read it on their behalf. There is a worry that we will see trans people requiring to out themselves when using services or to the whole workforce at their jobs due to recent controversial non-statutory guidance. I'm eager that we continue to respect people's right to privacy and not to expect people to out themselves when using our services or in workplaces, except where required for human resources. I'm also worried about the implications by the EHRC. Someone just remind me what that stands for. Equality and Human Rights Commission. Right? That women's groups such as the WI, Women's Institute, and LGBTQIA plus groups may be discriminating against LGBTQIA plus people due to how groups are organised. So the question after that is, can you provide assurances that we will continue to provide services and a workplace suitable for all, including straight and cis and LGBTQIA plus people, and will not let this idea that LGBTQIA plus community does not understand this discrimination it faces to get in the way of any potential funding. So I'll now respond to that as leader of the Council, and thank you to Councillor Rowe for the question on this issue. The Council is of course aware of the recent court judgment and has taken advice from our equality, diversity and inclusion specialists regarding the potential implications for the Council. We have also instigated an audit of the facilities that we own and also that we operate in partnership with others, including our leisure centres, depots and public conveniences. Our priority remains, as it did before this judgment, to ensure that everyone is treated with respect and dignity and protected from harassment and discrimination. That's the Council's view, and it's also my personal view. And we will continue to work to the commitments we've made on equality, diversity and inclusion. So Councillor Rowe is not here to ask a supplementary question, so we will now move on to item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There are no matters referred, Chair.
Item 7, the forthcoming decisions list. Are there any comments on this? None, thank you. So we move on to item 8. This is paper MCA/24/55, the Depot Transformation Project, and we have officers here to support this item. I will now invite the Cabinet Member for Housing and Property to introduce the report. Councillor Winch.
Our existing operational depot in Stowmarket won't meet the operating requirements of the waste and public realm teams in the short or longer term. In particular, the capacity for food waste vehicles and for the additional staff required for simpler recycling are an issue going forward, and this poses a risk to the introduction of simpler recycling in the middle of next year. Now, our preferred solution has always been to find a new depot site and relocate the depot, and last year we continued to search for a site. That's not a straightforward thing to do because it requires an optimal operational location with established planning permission on of the right size. However, with the uncertainty relating to local government at the end of last year, we decided to stop that search and to focus on the work that we needed to do to upgrade our existing depot to prepare us for the simpler recycling implementation. And what this paper does is flesh out in a bit more detail what is it that we need to do and what's it going to cost us to do that. So what do we need to do? We need to reconfigure our parking spaces and external yard spaces. So in particular, we need to create more space for the food waste vehicles at the depot. And because we've got additional staff, we need to find additional parking for them, and that will be done partly by adding parking spaces in front of the depot and partly by agreeing with a third-party provider some additional parking spaces, because we don't want to cause a huge parking issue for all the residents in the area. We also need to add electric charging points, because I'm sure everyone remembers 2 of our food waste vehicles will be electric, and there may be other additional electric vehicles based at that depot going forward. We also plan to refurbish the office space, so to provide a more open plan office area for all staff with new operational staff welfare and convenience areas. We need to do this obviously because it's the right thing to do for somebody's working environment, but staff retention and attraction are key operational issues for us going forward. We need to reconfigure the dock level loading bay to improve its operational efficiency, and we need to just expand the existing off-site storage that we've already got at Great Ashfield for food waste bins and caddies, but also additional recycling bins. So these plans, which are put in a bit more detail in the paper, will be completed over the next 12 months, and the assumption is that this work will future-proof the depot for up to roughly 5 years hence. So when we go into local government reorganisation, there won't be an immediate problem for whatever happens. The financial implications of this. So during last year's budgeting cycle, we included the costs of the new depot, so roughly £12 million in total, split 50-50 between us and Babra, so £6 million each. But we didn't put it in the budget for this year. We moved it back in time, so it's in the medium-term financial plan, but it wasn't something we were going to do straight away. So at that point, we effectively made the decision to delay a new depot, though the formal ratification of this is one of the recommendations in this paper. Now, in the budget, we also included costs of $450,000 for this year and an extra $250,000 for next year. And this paper is suggesting we bring next year's allocation into this year, giving a total budget for this year of $700,000. There's about a $10,000 interest charge implication for that. and there's a £20,000 per year charge for the off-site parking. So what we're really doing is we're not changing the total value over the medium term, but we're saying we need it all this year so we can get all the work done. And what's really behind this is we just need to future-proof ourselves so that we don't get into a position where we can't do something. A couple of points to note is we've actually spent 70k on the depot since 22-23 on maintenance, so we would expect some savings in the next few years in reducing maintenance. And we're also looking at potentially funding roughly half of this from SIL, so that's something that needs to be done by the end of this month. So I think a summary of this paper really is we need, because we haven't got a new depot site, we need to do something about our current depot in order to future-proof ourselves. We need to change just the financial profiling of this to make sure that officers can get on and get this done without us going through a cabinet cycle again. I'd like to thank officers Emily Atack and Mark Ames and their teams for working on this and getting us to this point. And I'd like to move the recommendations laid out in 3.1 to 3.3.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Stringer. Thank you. Are there any questions from Cabinet members on this item? Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, if that's all right. The first one is regards to where there's mention from 11.4 to 11.9 that we are going to have increased electricity use and increased staff travelling to the site. So I have two questions on that. The first is also asking for clarity with regards to 4.11 and 5.2. So will we be ensuring the best value possible for EPC upgrades at the same time as we're doing the maintenance to the building, such as adequate insulation? I could not find that in the paper. As the potential for LGR looks to be 2 to 3 years and therefore longer still for a depot change, i.e. getting a new one, if one was affordable by that time, we're still potentially looking at over 5 years, maybe 10 years. So I think it's in the best interest to upgrade our efficiency if possible. So that's my first question.
Can we do that one first? So I'll try and give a little answer and then I'll pass over to Emily to flesh it out. But I think what we're trying to do in this paper is highlight the areas where we need to carry out work. I think you're dropping a level of detail there quite rightly. Where we can find opportunities to improve the EPC rating, we will do, but that requires looking at a lot of the detail of the configuration of the buildings because they are quite old, 50-year-old buildings. But do you want to flesh that out a bit, Emily?
Thank you. So we are looking at EPCs across the council's portfolio, and these properties fall within the council's portfolio. So we'll look at that as part of the programme of how we improve our EPCs. The requirements of EPCs have changed as well, so we actually need to do more to achieve a C rating than we did 10 years ago. So we might see that EPC ratings are static for the depots, but that won't mean that we haven't undertaken improvements. It's just that the requirements are now higher. So it will be about balancing value for money, really, I suppose, in terms of the works that we're able to deliver, bearing in mind these buildings do have a limited period of time or limited life left, and mitigating the use of energy within those buildings while we're there. I think the increased electricity use is also to do with the use of EV vehicles rather than the building itself being less energy efficient. So it will be a balance, really, is the answer, and we'll look at it as part of our portfolio as a whole, as well as undertaking works. Whenever we undertake works, we do make sure that we do so in a way that is compatible with our EPC ambitions.
And the second question, along the same lines with the increased staff, Are we able to provide similar financial incentive to the free parking that's offered to staff for sustainable travel, i.e. maybe some incentives so people don't have to travel by car, they can use alternatives? Have we looked at that at all?
I'll try and answer, and then I'm going to pass over. It's obviously outside the scope of this paper. I think it's actually quite an interesting idea, given that we're got to pay for car parking spaces, but it's really part of the terms and conditions. And any thoughts, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly something that we had a discussion about, but we haven't actually got to that stage yet with the staff through our contractor, Serco in the main, of actually making any sort of formal proposals around that. But it's certainly a possibility. Obviously, together with any scheme, you have to ensure that that's what actually happens at that time of the morning when staff are arriving as well. But yeah, something we'll look at.
Any other questions from Cabinet members? I've got one myself. We're talking about potentially using SIL to fund some of this work. And obviously we're all aware that SIL applications have particular criteria that have to be met. They do take a little while to prepare. I'll be confident that a SIL bid will be ready in time for the sort of the next deadline. I don't know if anyone can take that.
We've had discussions with the SIL team, and we are planning to progress bids for the next deadline, and we're optimistic that will be the case. But certainly, if it depends really on final quotes from contractors, but we're pretty well down the route on a lot of that. So yeah, we're quite optimistic.
Just a supplementary to that, obviously SIL bids are often held up because there's planning permission required. I assume that's not. In this case, we don't need it.
We're looking at the requirement for planning around a small change to car parking, but there's majority of the bid for the site won't be based around that, and that cost, most of the costs are in other areas, which we've been given some indication will fall within the SIL scheme.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from Cabinet members? If not, Councillor Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. Well, my first question is actually around the SIL. I accept and know that it's possible to use SIL for infrastructure, and we have used it at the depot before to fund the HVO tanks. But considering the enormous pressure that the SIL funds are under, particularly from educational purposes, which we discussed within our SIL working group, which is yet to report to Council, is it the best option to fund up to half of this from SIL? So that's the first question.
Yeah, I personally think it is a reasonable thing to do, because this is an absolutely core service for everyone in the community. And I think you obviously could go down everything on the SIL list and say which has a higher priority over the other things. And we've got all sorts of stuff on that SIL list. You could say, is it as important as education? In which case you'd never do half the things on the list. So I think it's a completely reasonable thing for us to be doing here.
Thank you for that. And then the second question was really around the parking. I can see the mitigation measures that you're taking in order to ensure that extra vehicles arriving at the depot, is not an issue. But speaking as a Stowmarket member, the parking around that area is extremely sensitive, and your 2 ward members for that ward are under constant pressure regarding on-street parking by commuters and others. Even if you pay for alternative parking, presumably in a council car park, how do you ensure that we don't get the reputational damage of our staff potentially creating further problems in an area which we know is already under pressure and subject to a parking review and potential parking permits? So I'm just interested to understand, how do you actually enforce that to make sure that that does not happen, because that is a real potential bugbear, I think, for local members, and also potentially for residents if they find that people are parking cars in their locality and walking to the depot rather than using your alternative measures. So I'd like to understand a little bit better about where that £20,000 is going to be spent on.
We'll hand over to Mark to sort of flesh this out a bit. But there's parking along the front of the depot along Creating Road West, and then there's extra parking with a private provider. And I believe we've got sufficient parking for all the vehicles that will be required at the depot. So I think our argument will be there is no requirement for on-street parking from this expansion.
I think that's right essentially, but it would require also an element of checking on the ground with supervisors, checking that the private provision of parking is being used by drivers and they're not sort of parking 20, 30 metres shorter on street because they can get a space in that location. And and as Councillor will be aware, we are progressing residents' parking zone, and if he would happily have a chat with his officers at Suffolk County Council to push that along, that would be really appreciated as well, because we're waiting to hear back from them.
Okay, if there's no further questions, then I can now open this item up for debate. Councillor Stringer.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mellon. We in an ideal world wouldn't want to be here, but actually, given the circumstances that we've got, we're having, I think the Suffolk phrase, we're making the best out of a bad job, and which is exactly what we're doing. It would be ideal to have another fresh depot somewhere in the area, but obviously going into what we're now about to go through in local government, that would probably be a step too far at the moment. Certainly with the changes coming in potentially next year as well, they've got to bed in as well. So I think with the upcoming review of residents' parking and stuff in this area, I think this is also, yes, there'll be a bit of extra traffic here now, but I think now is a good time to do this, because with that, look at residents' parking. I think we've got an opportunity to get this right, or as right as it can ever be. So I think there's been a lot of work done on this document, and I praise it. It's a very easy document to read, thank goodness, and to understand. And I think it's very reasonable what we're putting forward. So I have no problems with supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Yes, just from a finance point of view, the cost that we're talking about was included in the medium-term financial plan anyway. It's simply bringing it forward. So I personally think that's a perfectly fine thing to do. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Yeah, just to say then from the chair that I agree with what Councillor Stringer's just said, that we're in a difficult situation where we don't know where the boundaries of any successor authorities to us will land. So therefore, purchasing or deciding on a new depot site is just not possible at this moment. Hopefully we'll have some clarity on that over the next year, and then can sort of look forward to that decision. But I think this is absolutely the right thing to do in the circumstances. Make the necessary adjustments and investments in the current site so we can keep it going whilst we're looking forward to that day when we can know where a new depot could go in the future. So I'll just read the recommendations. 3.1, that delegated authority be given to the Director of Property, Development and Regeneration, the Director of Operations and the Mid-Suffolk Cabinet Member for Housing and Property to authorise improvement works, secure short-term storage and parking space and any other associated spend in line with the financial commitments set out in this paper in order to extend the useful economic life of these assets by a minimum of 5 years. 3.2, the Cabinet recommends to Council increasing the capital programme by £250,000 to accommodate the changes required to the depots as outlined in section 6.6 of the report, and the necessary adjustments are made to the Council's Treasury and Capital Investment Strategy. And finally, 3.3, that Cabinet notes the progress that has been made towards finding and specifying a new single depot for the delivery of the Council's services, and agrees to now pause any further work until the boundary changes and implications from local government reorganisation are better understood. And those are the recommendations. I will now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 5 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the officers for their support on that item. So we now move to item 9, and this is exclusion of the public, and that term includes the press. So we need to consider whether, pursuant to Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public should be excluded from the meeting for the business specified below, on the grounds that if the public were present during this item, it is likely that there would be the disclosure to them of exempt information as indicated against the item. The author of the report proposed to be considered in Part 2 of the agenda is satisfied that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. And for this we need a proposer and seconder. I'm happy to propose. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Winch. And we will now vote by show of hands. All those in favour? I think that's 4. Okay. Any against? Any abstaining? Councillor Davis, thank you. So that is passed.